There are things a woman does not loudly, not intentionally, that a man will carry with him for the rest of his life. And not because she hurt him, but because something in her presence woke up a part of him he didn't know was asleep. Something in the way she listened. Something in the way she didn't beg to be chosen, but chose herself. And suddenly, the game he was playing ends. You can love 1,000 women, chase 10,000 thrills, build a mountain of accomplishments tall enough to touch the sky, but the memory of one woman, the right woman, the one who simply refused to lose herself to keep you, that memory haunts. Because it's not about her lips, her body, or her voice. It's about the moment you saw yourself through her eyes and didn't recognize what you had become. It's about the mirror she held quietly, without judgment, that made you want to become better. She never asked for much, just the truth, just presence, just respect. But maybe he didn't know how to give those things. Not because he didn't want to, but because no one ever taught him how. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made her unforgettable. She didn't punish him for being unready. She didn't shame him for being scared. She just left. And she left with grace, not drama. And it's that grace that men remember. Not the kind of grace that comes from perfection, but the kind that comes from knowing your worth. It's that soft silence, the kind that speaks louder than words, when she realizes that loving you shouldn't feel like bleeding slowly. When a woman stops trying to prove her love and starts protecting her peace, the man who once took her for granted will remember her every time he meets someone who doesn't carry that same fire, that same peace, that same depth. If you've ever been that woman, or if you're finding your way back to her, this is for you. And if you've ever been the man who realized too late, this might be the moment your soul has been waiting for. Stay with me. Let this sink. Let yourself feel. And if you find your heart beating a little louder while listening, take a moment to breathe with it. Let it teach you something. If you feel seen in any part of this, subscribe. If your heart is speaking, let it be heard. Share this with someone who needs to hear it too. Now close your eyes, if it's safe to do so, because what you're about to feel next goes deeper. He never expected her to be the one that stayed in his mind after all the others had faded. He never imagined that it would be her silence, not her laughter, not her softness, not her sweetness that would echo the loudest in his memory. It was the moment she looked at him, no longer with longing, no longer with hope, but with the quiet realization that he would never meet her where she stood. That look, that final look, that's what haunts him. It didn't come with yelling. It didn't come with blame. It came like the stillness before a storm passes, when the world feels heavy with something you can't name. And in that stillness, she let him go. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she started loving herself more. And he saw it. He saw the weight she'd been carrying just to stay close to him. The parts of herself she dimmed, the dreams she shelved, the truths she swallowed. He realized she had been giving and giving, hoping that one day he'd meet her halfway. But she'd been dancing alone, loving for two, apologizing for things she didn't do just to keep the peace. She never asked for forever. She just wanted real presence, honesty. But he kept playing it safe, hiding behind walls built long before she arrived. And when she finally walked away, she didn't slam the door. She didn't send a storm of texts. She didn't make a scene. She simply stopped explaining, stopped waiting, stopped breaking herself into smaller pieces, hoping he'd find her more digestible. And that's what breaks him now. Because men aren't haunted by the women who yell, who chase, who beg. They're haunted by the women who gave them a chance to rise and left when they kept choosing to crawl. She became the moment he realized his patterns, the mirror he spent his life avoiding. She became the memory that whispers, late at night. She would have stayed if you had just shown up. He scrolls through photos, pretending not to search for her. He walks into rooms, hoping the air might carry a trace of her perfume. He dates others, but finds himself comparing the way they speak, the way they love, to the way she did it unapologetically, completely, but never at the cost of herself. The truth is, she didn't leave to punish him. She left to return to herself, and that's why she haunts him, because she was the moment he saw what was possible and what he lost when he couldn't rise to meet it. He didn't just lose a woman. He lost the version of himself he could have become with her. And no amount of distractions, no amount of other women, no amount of time can erase that kind of knowing. He remembers the way she used to wait for him to open up, the way she would pause in conversation, giving him space, believing he might meet her there in that silence. He remembers how her voice lowered when he seemed distant, not because she was afraid, but because she hoped he would feel safe enough to soften. She was never demanding, just present, just real. But he mistook her depth for intensity, her honesty for drama, her boundaries for walls, and he confused her desire for emotional connection with neediness because he'd never learned the difference between chaos and intimacy, and she knew that. She saw his wounds long before he could name them. She saw the boy behind the man, the fear beneath the distance. But she also saw that no amount of her love could rewrite a story he hadn't chosen to heal. So she stopped trying, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. She realized the difference between effort and sacrifice, between patience and self-betrayal, between love and attachment. And once she saw that, something inside her shifted. It wasn't sudden, it was quiet, a slow pulling back of the heart, like a tide returning to the ocean. And he felt it. At first he thought she was just tired, that maybe she needed reassurance, that maybe if he sent a sweet message, if he touched her the right way, she'd fall back into him like she always did. But she didn't, because this time she wasn't waiting to be chosen. She was choosing herself. And now he understands what it means to lose a woman in stages, to lose her first in her eyes, then in her voice, then in her silence, and finally, in her absence. He knows now that the most dangerous thing a man can do is ignore a woman when she's trying to hold him close, not with force, but with truth, not with control, but with vulnerability. That when she says, "I need to feel you here with me," and he shrugs it off or jokes it away, a part of her begins to pack up, not her things, her hope. And once a woman loses hope, there is no fight left. That's why she didn't argue, why she didn't plead, why she didn't explain her worth one more time, because she already knew it. She was just waiting to see if he did. Now he replays the last moments, the final glance, the breath she took before turning away, the strength it took to say nothing when she had every right to scream. And it destroys him, because now he knows that the kindest goodbye is the one that doesn't ask for closure. It simply becomes it. There's a kind of woman who doesn't leave to punish you, she leaves, because staying would mean abandoning herself. And once she makes that choice, there's no returning to who she was before. He didn't realize this until much later, when her name stopped being just a memory and became a lesson, until the sound of her laughter, once background noise in a life too busy to notice, became the loudest echo in his solitude, until he stopped seeing her as the one who asked for too much, and started seeing her as the only one who ever asked for something real. That's when regret sets in. Not the shallow kind, where you miss the routine, but the kind that cuts through the center of your being. The kind that keeps you awake, not because you miss her presence, but because you remember the man you almost became in her love. She saw it. She believed in it. She built space in her world for it. But he couldn't step into it. And now, he watches as others speak her name with a reverence he never gave. He sees her shining in places he never took her, loving in ways he couldn't receive. He hears stories about her joy, her depth, her passion, and they sound familiar but distant, like a language he once knew and forgot how to speak. He realizes she didn't stop loving. She just stopped giving her love to someone who didn't know how to hold it. She moved on, not to replace him, but to return to herself, to the woman she was before. She tried to shrink herself into the outlines of a man who wasn't ready. And that's the part that lingers, the part that haunts. Because he wasn't replaced, he was revealed. Revealed as a man who had a chance to rise and didn't. A man who was given the keys to a kingdom but chose to live outside its gates. A man who mistook patience for permanence and never imagined she'd actually leave. But she did. Not to make a point, not to make him suffer, but because she realized that staying would have meant slowly disappearing. Now he walks through life with that quiet knowledge that she would have stayed through the storm, through the mess, through the healing if he had just let her in, if he had just said the words, if he had just opened his heart before it was too late. But he didn't, and now every woman who comes after her, no matter how kind or beautiful or wise, will feel like a chapter in a book whose cover he already lost. Because some women are not replaceable, they are reminders, and some reminders stay with you forever. It doesn't matter how much time passes. There are echoes that don't fade. He might build a new life. He might laugh again, work hard, even fall in love again, but nothing quite feels the same. Because the kind of woman she was doesn't just disappear. She becomes a watermark on every page of his life, visible only when the light hits a certain way. And sometimes, that light comes in the form of quiet moments, like hearing a song she once hummed without knowing, or seeing someone wear her favorite color and feeling a strange warmth in his chest, or waking up in the middle of the night from a dream that felt too real where she wasn't angry or distant, but smiling, just smiling. Those are the moments he realizes that what she gave wasn't temporary. It wasn't convenience. It was truth, and the truth, once tasted, never leaves you. She loved him in a way that didn't ask for perfection but honesty, that didn't demand power but partnership, that didn't want to be worshipped but seen, and he couldn't give that, not because he didn't care, but because he hadn't yet met himself. He hadn't yet faced the parts of him that flinched at love, that doubted safety, that turned warmth into suspicion. So she left, and in her absence, he began to understand. He remembered how she didn't just love who he was, she loved who he could be. She saw beyond the mask, beyond the noise, beyond the hesitation. She saw the boy who never felt good enough, the man who had learned to survive, not connect. And maybe, just maybe, that's what scared him most. Because when someone sees you that clearly, you can't pretend anymore. You either step into that mirror or you walk away from it. And he walked away not from her, but from the reflection he wasn't ready to face. Now, he lives with that memory, not as a punishment, but as a quiet ache, a whisper. He wonders if she thinks of him too. Not always, not painfully, but sometimes. In those soft, golden hours when the world is quiet and the soul is louder than the mind, he wonders if she remembers the way they almost made it, the way their laughter fit like puzzle pieces, the way she once whispered, "I see you," and meant it. Maybe she does. But she doesn't look back with longing. She looks back with peace, because the woman she became after him was born from the woman she refused to bury for him. And now, he's left with only one question, one that comes not as a shout, but a whisper. What if I had just loved her better? That question doesn't shout, it lingers. It follows him into new relationships, sits beside him when things get quiet. What if I had just loved her better? Not bigger, not louder, just better. What if I had listened instead of defended? What if I had stayed still when she opened up, instead of shifting uncomfortably and changing the subject? What if I had told her I was scared, instead of pretending I didn't care? What if I had met her softness with my truth, instead of my silence? It's not guilt that haunts him. It's clarity. The clarity that comes too late. The kind that only appears once you've lost the one person who didn't want to fix you but just wanted to meet you. She never asked for a perfect man, just a present one. And now he understands why she stopped explaining herself, why she stopped asking, why she stopped fighting. Because a woman only fights for a connection when she believes there's something to save. But once she realizes she's the only one holding the rope, she lets go. Not because she stopped caring, but because caring alone isn't enough. It takes two people to build a bridge. She built her side, laid every stone with her bare hands, waited on the other end, whispered his name, lit candles in the dark, but he never started. And now, every woman he meets walks on that same unfinished bridge and wonders why he can't cross, why there's a part of him that remains distant, why his heart hesitates when love gets too close. It's because it already knows the price of not showing up. And deep down, he's afraid to be seen again, afraid to fail again, afraid to love again, because what if he ruins it like he did before? But this isn't a story about shame. It's about awakening. Because sometimes, a woman comes into a man's life not to stay, but to show him everything he's been avoiding. She becomes the turning point he never saw coming, the lesson no book could teach, the heartbeat that shook him awake. She doesn't wait for a thank you. She doesn't need him to become a better man for her. She just hopes maybe that he becomes one for himself. And that is what haunts. Not her absence, her grace. He doesn't talk about her anymore, not because he's forgotten, but because the memory is sacred now, too real to reduce to casual words, too deep to explain to someone who wasn't there, who didn't feel the weight of her presence or the silence she left behind. So he carries her differently now, not in longing, not in pain, but in the space where growth once felt impossible. She became the beginning of his reckoning, not with her but with himself. And that is what no one tells you about loss, that sometimes the person you lose becomes the very path you needed to find yourself. She didn't just leave a man behind. She left behind a question he would ask for years. Why did I wait until she was gone to realize she was the one? It wasn't her beauty that stayed with him, or her body, or even her voice. It was her presence. The kind of presence that didn't just fill a room, it filled the gaps inside him. And once she was gone, those gaps echoed louder. He used to think love was something that could be replaced, swapped out, that another woman would come, and that time would fade what she meant. But time didn't fade her. Time revealed her. Time pulled back the layers, one by one, until he saw everything he had missed. Not just in her, but in himself. The way he flinched when things felt too safe. The way he shut down when she asked him to open up. The way he confused peace for boredom and chaos for passion. She was never the problem. She was the mirror. And when she left, he smashed that mirror in his mind, hoping it would free him. But the shards only cut deeper, because you can't destroy a truth that lives in your bones. So now, he moves slower, loves differently, feels more, not because he's healed, but because he knows what unhealed love costs. He knows the price of not showing up. He knows the difference between wanting a woman and being ready for her. And sometimes, when he's alone, he imagines another version of their story. One where he didn't run, one where he stayed, One where he opened his mouth and told her everything, every fear, every wound, every truth. One where he held her hand instead of pulling away. But that version lives only in his heart now. She's gone, not in anger, not in sadness. She's just free. And that freedom is what haunts him most. He sees her sometimes not in person, but in reflections, in the way someone orders their coffee with confidence, in the soft laugh of a stranger on the street, in the sound of boots on pavement that somehow match her rhythm. It's not her. Of course it's not her. But his body reacts anyway. Like it remembers. Like it still hopes. That's the thing about certain women. Their absence doesn't just leave a space. It teaches you to recognize what presence should have felt like all along. She was never trying to be unforgettable. She just was, because she brought something real into a world that rewards masks. She didn't care about playing it cool. She cared about connection, and that scared him, because when someone looks at you and sees all the parts you've buried, you have two choices. You step into the light with them, or you turn away, afraid of what they might find. He turned away, and now, years later, he wonders what would have happened if he had just stayed still, just long enough to let her love in, without questioning it, without testing it, without pushing it away just to see if it would come back. But it didn't, because at some point, love that keeps getting pushed away stops knocking. And that's what she did. She stopped knocking, not out of coldness, not because she didn't care, but because she knew her love wasn't meant to be dragged behind someone who didn't want to walk beside it. He remembers how she used to pause in the middle of a conversation, not because she forgot her words, but because she was hoping he'd meet her there, hoping he'd say something real. But he stayed quiet, and now that silence lives in him, a hollow reminder of all the things he never said, all the ways he let her carry the weight of connection on her own. He didn't cheat, he didn't lie, he just wasn't there. And now he knows that absence isn't always physical. You can sit beside someone every day and still not show up. She showed up, fully, honestly, even when it cost her comfort, even when it meant sitting in the fire of vulnerability. She sat there anyway, until she couldn't anymore. Now he wonders if she ever knew how much he cared, how much he felt but couldn't say, how much he tried in his own quiet, broken way to love her, even if it didn't reach her the way she needed. Maybe she knew. Maybe that's why she left gently, because even as she walked away, she loved him. But she loved herself more. He doesn't tell his friends, not because he's ashamed of loving her, but because the kind of love he had for her didn't make sense in words. It was the kind of love that didn't scream, didn't shine in grand gestures or loud declarations. It was quiet, deep, like an underground current, pulling him towards something he didn't understand until it was gone. And how do you explain that? How do you tell someone that the woman you lost wasn't just a chapter, but the hinge the whole book turned on? So he keeps her to himself. She lives in the pauses of his conversations, in the long drives with no music playing, in the way he started to speak more gently, more truthfully, as if trying to honor the space she once filled. He's learned not to run now, not from women but from himself, because that's who he was really afraid of facing. Not her, not her needs, but the version of him she believed in, the one he had to become to love her back. She called it out of him, and he wasn't ready. That's the part that breaks him the most. Not the loss, but the timing. Because she didn't just love who he was, she loved the man he could be. And he sees that man now, sometimes, when he's being honest, when he's present, when he finally stops pretending he doesn't feel. But she's not there to see it. And that's life, isn't it? Sometimes you meet the right person before you've become the right version of yourself. And sometimes they don't stay. Not because the love wasn't real, but because they were never meant to complete you, they were meant to wake you up. That was her, the woman who didn't just love him but challenged him. The one who held a mirror to his face and said, "I see more in you than you're willing to see in yourself." She didn't say it with words. She said it with the way she showed up, with the way she stayed through the hard moments until it became clear that staying meant slowly disappearing. He didn't think she'd leave. Not really, because she loved him. But what he didn't understand then is that love without safety is survival. And survival isn't love. She needed to be seen. He needed to feel safe. And somewhere in between, they missed each other. Now he walks through life with a quiet reverence, not just for her, but for the version of himself she saw before he could. And that's what stays with him. Not the ending, but the invitation she offered, and the silence that followed when he never showed up to accept it. There's a moment, sometimes late at night, when the noise of the world falls away and the stillness of regret steps forward. It doesn't come crashing in, it drips slowly, soft, relentless. He'll be lying there, staring at the ceiling, with someone else breathing beside him, and it'll hit him, not in a loud, heartbreaking way, but in that gentle ache, the one that whispers, "She would have understood this part of me." Because she did. She saw the cracks, the ones he hid so well, the ones even he tried to forget, and she didn't turn away. She leaned in, touched them softly, as if to say, "I've got cracks too. Maybe we don't have to break each other further." But he couldn't believe her, couldn't trust that kind of safety. Because when you've been taught that love is earned through suffering, peace feels suspicious. So he pushed, not violently, just enough. Enough to make her question, enough to make her doubt, enough to protect his own fear of being known. And she stayed for a while. But love has limits when it isn't watered, and even the deepest ocean eventually dries up when the sun of neglect shines on it too long. She wasn't asking for magic, just effort, just honesty, just someone who would say, "I don't know how to do this perfectly, but I'm willing to learn with you." But he never said that, never let himself go there, because vulnerability isn't taught in a world that rewards detachment, because being soft was once punished in him, because showing up for someone else means you first have to show up for yourself, and he had never done that. She did. That's the difference. She was soft, but not weak. She cried, but never begged. She bent, but never broke. And when she left, she didn't crumble. She rose. She became more of herself, more radiant, more steady. She didn't need revenge. Her healing was the closure, and he watches from afar now, even if only in his mind. Watches her move through life with that glow, the glow of a woman who no longer waits to be chosen. That's the part that cuts deep. Not that she moved on, but that she moved up, into her power, into her peace, into the kind of love that begins within. And he's not angry. He's proud of her. But that pride is a quiet, aching one. The kind that stays behind your ribs. The kind that makes you pause before speaking. The kind that doesn't seek attention but won't be ignored. Because once you've been loved by a woman like that, nothing else feels quite as real. And that reality doesn't fade. It follows you,